Hi guys, welcome back with another video. In today's drama, from saving your life to becoming a psychopathic criminal, and the truth hurts more than anything else. The story begins with Dr. Seok, the best neurosurgeon in Korea. However, due to her very unique personality, she cannot practice legally, as she was expelled from medical school. Because of this, she was forced to perform illegal surgeries. On the other hand, Professor Chu was considered a genius in his field. He also had a peculiar personality, but he hid it well. Just as he steps out of the operating room, a police officer approaches him to show him a video of a brain surgery. It was someone incredibly talented performing underground surgeries. That's why they wanted Professor Chu to help identify the person behind it, since only someone with his skill could carry out such a procedure. However, the professor says he'll watch the video later. His apprentice, though, realizes that it's probably the student he expelled a few years back. Meanwhile, Dr. Seok's patient wakes up after a successful operation. He was a dangerous mobster and couldn't go to a hospital, so he had no choice but to trust her. At the same time, the nurse who assisted in the surgery already knew Seok and was upset because she was paid less than everyone else. She confronts the doctor and reveals that she knows her secret, but Seok doesn't seem too concerned. Everyone already knows she lost her medical license. Still, the nurse threatens to report her to the police if she doesn't pay her a certain amount of money every month. With no other option, Seok agrees. The nurse leaves with a smile, unaware that behind Seok's sweet and innocent appearance hides a psychopath. After packing everything up, Seok asks her assistant to go ahead while she handles some important matters. Later, we discover she gave the nurse a sleeping drug. When the nurse wakes up, she searches for the money she was promised, but it was a trap meant to get rid of her. When the assistant realizes he was tricked into leaving, he turns the car around to see what's going on. When he arrives, he finds the nurse dead. Rather than being shocked, he simply scolds Seok and immediately starts cleaning up. Meanwhile, Professor Chue has figured out who the underground surgeon is, so he tries to find her. He meets with Mr. Min to ask where she is, but the man doesn't know her. The video came from the Chinese. In a change of scene, we see that Dr. Seok runs a pharmacy as a cover. After work, a criminal from the business across the street keeps staring at her. When she gets home, she tells her assistant that she's fed up with him. Knowing her well, the assistant begs her not to kill him. At that moment, Professor Chui knocks on her door. The reason he had been desperately looking for her is that he has a tumor. Since it's located in a very dangerous area, he wants her to be the one to operate on him. However, she refuses. Then we learn why she was expelled from med school. The professor had forbidden her from operating again, which enraged her so much that she tried to kill him in front of everyone. Because of that, she was expelled. Although she begged him for another chance, he simply ignored her, and she never forgave him. As he's leaving her house, Professor Chu has a medical episode. When he reaches for his medication, Seok comes out and shatters the bottle. Thankfully, her assistant had already called an ambulance, and they managed to save his life. It turns out, the professor once had to operate on a friend, but his real intention was to end the man's life. When Seok found out, she stepped in and saved the patient. This enraged Chu. That's why he banned her from ever operating again. She had only done it to protect him from a scandal that would have ruined his reputation. But instead of thanking her, he denied everything and stripped her of her right to operate. Back to the current timeline, the professor asks her to stop killing people and return to her career as a neurosurgeon. He promises to help her go far, but Seok just wants him to leave her alone. The next day, she is happy to learn that her favorite restaurant won't be shut down after all, but her joy is short-lived. The professor has had her pharmacy closed, and not only that, he also shuts down Dr. Han's clinic. Now she has nowhere to perform illegal surgeries. Furious, she calls Chu, who tells her she needs to come to Busan to fix things. In Busan, Seok overhears that the hostess's son is very ill and has little time left. Due to his condition, no doctor is willing to operate, but Seok could. She approaches the woman and offers to save the boy in exchange for not awarding the professor with the prize. The woman doubts this is possible, but Seok tells her she's the best in the country and that she's performed a similar surgery before. Still, the hostess asks her to leave, saying it's too risky. Seok insists she's the woman's only chance and tells her the offer stands only until the ceremony begins. That night, during the pre-award celebration, the hostess asks the professor about his star student. He replies that she was his best student and his greatest pride. Upon hearing this, the woman rushes to Seok and begs her to save her son. Seok doesn't waste time and calls her entire team. During the surgery, the hostess is extremely nervous. Though there are complications, Seok successfully completes the operation. As a result, the award for Best Neurosurgeon goes to someone else, something that greatly pleases Seok, as she believes she's humiliated the professor. What she doesn't know is that he was aware of everything. He was the one who told the woman to accept his student's offer. After the ceremony, Seok runs into the son of the professor's old friend. He tells her that after Choi operated on his father back when he was still a student, the man disappeared because he wanted to live freely. He asked his son never to look for him again. Meanwhile, the police contact the professor. They've found new evidence in the case of the underground neurosurgeon and ask him to help identify the suspect. Although he already knows it's Seok, he agrees, hoping to buy her more time. However, despite his efforts to divert attention, the police eventually find the nurse's body. The professor knew that the nurse wasn't Seok's first victim. Back in university, she had already taken someone's life. One day, he had gone to visit her and discovered her dark secret. A man who had tried to assault her had become her first victim. Although it was in self-defense, she hid the body because it could have destroyed her career. The professor offered to help her cover it up. The next morning, the police launched a major operation to capture the nurse's killer. When Seok finds out, she returns to the crime scene and sees that the professor is trying to protect her. Even so, she refuses to operate on him. Instead, she plans to go after the professor's friend, whom she suspects of sending him to the afterlife. Later, she visits Kyun, who shows her a video of a nursing home that might be housing her father. Most of the patients there had been admitted against their will, and there's one senile old man who looks a lot like him. So, they decide to go and verify in person. When they arrive at the psychiatric hospital, it's closed. The person in charge confirms that her father was there. He had the same surgical scar on his head. He also mentions that someone with gray hair took him away. Still, they doubt if it's truly him, especially since the boy is offering a reward for information about his father. They start searching the hospital for any proof. The boy begins to get agitated, but the man insists that it's him. He asks a friend to send over a photo showing all the patients. Hours pass, but the photo doesn't arrive. In the end, the caretaker tells them to come back the next day. The boy loses patience and pushes him, causing a cut on the man's hand. Seok steps in to calm the situation and treat the wound. And that's when she discovers the man is wearing her father's ring. This confirms he really was in the hospital, but she doesn't want the boy to see him just yet. What she didn't expect was that he had been listening the whole time. The boy chases after the old man, who tries to run away. They begin to fight, and eventually they both fall off a cliff. The old man dies, and Kyun is in critical condition. Furious, Seok goes straight to Professor Chue, who continues to deny everything. Later, she returns home and pretends to have a peaceful night. In reality, she has a secret shed where she hides the car of her late friend, the same car she used to kill him. Now, she's planning to do the same to a detective who has figured out she was the one who killed the nurse. The next day, we see Seok out hunting because she's extremely stressed. Meanwhile, Professor Chu learns that Kyun is in critical condition, and the police are now interrogating Seok. Later, the professor meets with her to inform her that Rottweiler hair was found on the nurse's clothes. He warns her to be more careful, but Seok tells him to stay out of her business. Elsewhere, a detective is investigating the disappearance of his subordinate. After checking the call history, he discovers that the last person he spoke to was Chue. Meanwhile, the detective's captain is conspiring with a network of illegal surgeries and alerts the criminals that they may have a whistleblower among them. Meanwhile, Seok is distraught because she may have to get rid of her dogs to avoid being caught. Just then, Han arrives to tell her that everyone is worried about her, but Seok is just sad because she can no longer perform surgeries. The next day, her assistant is kidnapped. To protect Seok, he tells the captors that he's busy studying, but when Seok visits his academy and realizes he's not there, she begins to suspect something is wrong. Meanwhile, the poor guy is being beaten by gangsters who are trying to make him confess who killed the nurse, but he refuses to talk. At the same time, the detective gets in touch with Mr. Min, asking him to help identify who killed the nurse. He also calls Professor Chue and warns that if he doesn't help, he'll report everything to the police. Chue agrees to meet with Mr. Min, who tells him he needs assistance with a very important surgery. With no other option, the professor agrees. Eventually, the Chinese gangsters from the beginning are forced to call Siak because her assistant refuses to speak. She becomes furious and goes to see the mafia boss, demanding that he stay out of her problems. She can handle things on her own. The boss warns her that if her actions harm them, there will be consequences. In the end, she leaves with her assistant. On the way, Siak expresses her desire to move to the Philippines, but the assistant doesn't want to leave. She insists they should flee because she doesn't believe they can handle the criminal organizations. Suddenly, firefighters race toward her home. Her shed has burned down, with her dogs inside. It was the work of Professor Chue. She calls him angrily to confront him, but he believes it was the only way to destroy the evidence and keep her from being linked to the nurse's murder. He asks to meet, and when she finds him, she runs him over with her car. But strangely, he's unharmed. The next day, Mr. Min visits them to inform them of a very special job. At first, Siak refuses, but when she hears that the operation involves a brain, she agrees. On the ship where the operation will take place, Siak is shocked to learn that she will only be assisting Professor Chue. She had expected to be the lead surgeon. However, the patient had specifically requested the professor. The next day, the professor meets the patient, a famous pastor known for being immortal. That's why the operation had to be done illegally. If anyone found out, his church would lose all credibility. The surgery had to take place at night, so it would appear he simply went to sleep and woke up healed, making it look like a miracle. During the surgery, the professor gives Siak instructions, as if she were his student again. She follows them, and they begin working together. Despite his illness, the professor still performs like an excellent surgeon. His hands don't tremble at all. He is also genuinely happy to operate once more alongside his beloved student. After the surgery, Siak goes to thank him for everything he's done for her. Although she still hates him, she admits she respects him deeply. Once back on land, the mafia boss quickly says goodbye to the professor and takes the others out to eat to celebrate. However, Siak becomes suspicious. She senses he's up to something. She dismisses her assistant and asks to speak to the mafia boss alone. She intends to kill him, but before she can act, one of her former colleagues calls to inform her that the professor's condition is worse than expected and he doesn't have much time left. At that moment, the professor appears and takes Mr. Min away, as he already knew what he had been planning. He kills him before he can talk to the police. Siak witnesses the whole thing. While her assistant is worried about them being caught, Siak is more concerned about the professor's slim chance of survival. Later on, the detectives find Mr. Min's body, and the forensic examiner tells them that the person who killed him was highly meticulous, with great medical knowledge. The crime occurred in a location with only one security camera, and the killer never showed their face. However, the detective had seen him, but doesn't want to report it, since they've known each other since childhood. Meanwhile, Siak finally decides to operate on the professor, even though the chances of success are extremely low. At the same time, the professor brings in a doctor from the United States to be the lead surgeon. The new doctor is excited, having seen videos of Siak's surgical skills. He remembers he once had a friend just like her, a genius in the operating room, but unbearable outside of it. And that's why she had few friends. Elsewhere, the detective contacts the professor and tells him he knows he was the one who killed Mr. Min, and he also suspects that he was behind the other murders. The professor doesn't confirm or deny anything. Instead, he threatens him, saying he knows the detective is corrupt and hides evidence to extort criminals. He warns that if the detective exposes him, he'll expose the detective as well. Later that day, Kyun passes away, and at his funeral, Siak wonders why the professor killed the boy's father. He confesses that he did it because of her. The man had seen her talent and wanted to take her to Los Angeles to work in his private hospital. When Siak hears this, she finally understands the professor's reasoning. She admits that she would have done the same. Still, she's left with one question. If she was his favorite student, why did he forbid her from operating? The professor admits it was out of shame. He had hoped she would learn to control herself and not kill people in fits of rage, which he himself was guilty of. He pushed her away so she wouldn't be able to call him out for his hypocrisy. Hearing this makes Siak happy. She no longer wants him to die. She wants to operate on him, no matter how hard it is. Even though he doesn't want her pity, she warns him. If he doesn't accept her help, she'll force him. Later, she goes looking for an operating room, but only finds a small one with barely functioning equipment. Still, she's confident she can operate anywhere. But there's another obstacle. The detective has discovered that Seok was with Mr. Min the day he died, and now she's being called in to testify. The detective knows the professor has been protecting her and plans to use her to finally take him down. Seok is called in to testify, but as soon as the detectives try to get a statement out of her, she escapes. The detective, furious, orders her arrest and begins a citywide manhunt. At the same time, the professor prepares for surgery. Later, Seok meets with the professor, asking if he called the police on her. He says no, but she doesn't believe him. She's extremely upset. She doesn't understand how he could betray her like that after everything they've been through. Even so, she's determined to perform the operation, and though the professor is still resisting, she manages to convince him. Meanwhile, the detectives finally locate them, but when they arrive, the assistant begs them to let her finish the operation. It's a matter of life and death. The detective hesitates, but ultimately agrees to give her a little more time. Inside the operating room, Seok begins the surgery, and as expected, it's extremely difficult. The new American doctor assists her, impressed with every move. When complications arise, he suggests ending the operation, but Seok refuses. She's not willing to let her teacher die. She keeps going, even when the patient flatlines. She works with intense focus and determination. Finally, she saves him. Once the professor is stable, Seok walks out of the operating room, and the detective is waiting for her. She smiles at him, half mocking, half victorious, and gets arrested. Sometime later, we see the professor back at work, teaching a new group of students. In a voiceover, he says, "I was the best surgeon in the world. Now I'm just the man who created the best surgeon in the world.